1320 BC, in the lamplight of a sealed Egyptian tomb, servants laid garlic beside the dead pharaoh Tutankhamun, as if a handful of pungent bulbs could follow a king into eternity. In the same civilization, one later historical account claimed that 1,600 talent of silver, roughly $30 million in modern terms, were spent on garlic, onions, and radishes for the laborers who raised the pyramids. That is an astonishing price for something now sold by the bulb in supermarket bins, and it tells you something important right away. Garlic was never just a seasoning. It was medicine, ration, ritual object, trade good, protection, and power. It fed workers, traveled with armies, crossed oceans, and entered the bloodstream of empires one clove at a time. And that shift changed the world more than most people think. But this story does not start in a royal tomb. It starts somewhere harsher, windier, and much earlier. Long before kings were buried with it, garlic grew wild in Central Asia, especially across the region centered on modern Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. That is the oldest confirmed center of origin. It was not the plump supermarket bulb people know now. It was tougher, smaller, more variable, more like a survivor than a delicacy. Archaeological evidence places garlic deep in prehistory. Clay sculptures of garlic bulbs date to around 3700 BC, and illustrations appear in Egyptian crypts from around 3200 BC. By 2600 to 2100 BC, the Sumerians were already using garlic for healing. By 2700 BC, it was one of the most used remedies in ancient China. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Once human beings learned that a sharp-smelling wild allium could be dug up, carried, replanted, and divided by its cloves, they had found a crop that could travel almost anywhere with them. That may be the most important biological fact in the whole story. For most of its cultivated life, garlic was not reproduced from seed in the ordinary agricultural way. It was propagated vegetatively by cloves, bulbs, and bulbils. In simple terms, people took part of the plant and made another plant from it. That made it reliable, uniform, portable, a food you could carry in a saddlebag, a ship hold, or a soldier's ration sack, and then plant again the next season. Garlic was, in effect, a self-replicating traveling companion. And because it stored well, smelled unforgettable, and seemed to do something useful in the body, people kept taking it farther from its birthplace until a Central Asian wild plant had become one of the oldest horticultural crops on Earth. By the time Egypt emerged as one of the great organized states of the ancient world, garlic had already become embedded in both labor and belief. Egyptian and Indian cultures referred to it 5,000 years ago. The Ebers Papyrus, dated to around 1500 BC, listed garlic as a treatment for 32 illnesses. Garlic bulbs have been found in the palace at Knossos in Crete, dating roughly from 1850 to 1400 BC, and garlic accompanied Tutankhamun into his tomb around 1320 BC. It was eaten by laborers to increase strength and work capacity. That is why the image matters so much. Garlic beside the dead king and garlic in the hands of the living workers. The same bulb linked divine kingship to muscle and sweat. It moved up and down the whole social ladder of the ancient world. Then the Greeks took it and gave it another life. Hippocrates prescribed garlic for a variety of conditions. Greek athletes in the original Olympic world were given garlic as what may have been one of history's earliest performance enhancers. That phrase sounds modern, but the idea is ancient. Eat this, train harder, fight longer, endure more. But there was a problem. Garlic was admired for its power and mocked for its smell at the same time, a pattern that would follow for centuries. The more useful it became, the more it exposed class lines. Elites could praise its medicinal value while pretending not to eat it. Workers, soldiers, sailors, and athletes could not afford that kind of delicacy. Rome inherited both the garlic and the contradiction. Roman soldiers were fed it for courage before battle. Roman sailors used it. Pliny the Elder wrote about how to grow it and how to use it. Garlic became part of the practical kit of empire, the kind of cheap, pungent, durable plant that made sense in a civilization obsessed with roads, campaigns, storage, and movement. This is the part of the story that most people never learn. Empires do not run only on gold, iron, and law codes. They also run on small, transportable things that keep ordinary bodies functioning. Grain matters. Salt matters. Oil matters. Garlic matters. It was never glamorous, but it fit the machinery of empire perfectly. As the classical world fractured and new centers of scholarship rose, garlic did not disappear into folklore. It entered medicine more formally. In the Islamic Golden Age, the medical traditions of Greece, Rome, Persia, and the wider Near East were gathered, translated, and expanded. In 1025, Avicenna completed the Canon of Medicine, a work that would shape medical thought for centuries, and later reviews of the tradition record garlic among the substances recommended for problems such as arthritis, wounds, and other ailments. And this is where everything changed. Garlic stopped being merely a local cure repeated by custom and became part of a written, trans-regional medical system. Once knowledge is copied into books, it can outlive dynasties. Once it is taught in cities, it can leap across languages. Garlic did exactly that. In medieval Europe, it kept moving through two channels at once, kitchen and cure. Around the 9th century, sources in Ireland praised its medicinal benefits. Around 800, Charlemagne's capitulaire de Villiers effectively ordered useful plants, including garlic, to be cultivated on imperial estates. By 1390, one of England's oldest cookbooks, A Form of Curry, was already part of a culinary world in which garlic had an established place. That sounds domestic, almost ordinary, but this decision seemed small at the time. It was not. To appear in estate orders and recipe traditions is to become infrastructure. It means a plant is no longer exotic. It is expected. And yet medieval belief also wrapped garlic in fear. During plague centuries, people carried it, hung it in homes, and crushed it into remedies because they believed it could ward off corruption, infection, or evil air. A later historical review even records a claim that in Marseille in 1720, 1,000 inhabitants were saved during a plague outbreak through garlic-based treatment. Whether every such claim would survive modern clinical scrutiny is not the point. The point is that garlic had become a trusted defense in an age when invisible causes of disease were poorly understood, but death was everywhere. When a thing survives repeated waves of panic, it enters cultural memory. Garlic did not just endure epidemics. It became one of the objects people reached for when the world felt contaminated. The early modern period then gave garlic what every world-changing crop eventually receives: ships. After 1492, the Columbian Exchange rearranged the biological map of the planet, and European colonial powers carried Old World plants into the Americas while returning New World crops back across the Atlantic. Garlic crossed with them. Spanish, Portuguese, and later other European settlers planted in the Caribbean, in mainland Spanish America, and across colonial trade routes that linked Europe, Africa, Asia, and the New World. In 1533, Catherine of Medici is said to have brought garlic and Florentine culinary influence into France at courtly level, but the larger story was far bigger than one marriage. What mattered was scale. Ships turned regional foods into global habits. A bulb native to Central Asia was now becoming an Atlantic crop, and, soon enough, an American one. By the 18th and 19th centuries, garlic had entered the age of chemistry and industry. In 1858, Louis Pasteur wrote that garlic killed bacteria. That was a remarkable pivot. For thousands of years, people had believed garlic could fight illness because tradition told them so. Now, one of the foundational figures of microbiology was writing in terms that suggested there might be a mechanism. But there was a problem. Industrial modernity standardized many foods, but it also standardized prejudice. Garlic was still treated in parts of Europe and North America as a peasant smell, an immigrant smell, a foreign smell. It could be admired in medicine and rejected at the table. Then migration changed the menu. Italians, Chinese communities, Middle Eastern cooks, Korean cooks, Spanish cooks, and many others brought garlic forward so relentlessly that eventually modern urban food culture gave up resisting it. That cultural victory hides a harder economic truth. Industrial agriculture did not make garlic noble. It made it scalable. The bulb that once moved in baskets and satchels now moved in rail cars, refrigerated containers, and global commodity chains. In the United States today, around 24,000 to 26,000 acres of garlic are planted annually, producing around 400 million pounds. In the European Union, countries together produce around 400,000 tons a year. Europe imported 281,000 tons of garlic in 2024. Spain, still Europe's biggest garlic power, saw its supply to the European market fall from 128,661 tons in 2020 to 105,155 tons in 2024. China, meanwhile, increased sales into Europe to 73,434 tons, and the average CIF price of Chinese garlic there rose from 1.49 euros per kilogram to 2.34 euros per kilogram. Garlic had become what very few ancient foods ever become, a fully industrialized global staple with price curves, quota systems, and continent scale sourcing. And this is where everything changed again, because one country came to dominate the crop to an almost unbelievable degree. In 2023, global garlic production stood at roughly 28 to 29 million metric tons, and China alone produced about 20,688,005 tons, around 72% of the world total. India followed with 3,266,023 tons. Bangladesh produced 548,907 tons. Egypt produced 490,418. South Korea produced 318,220. Those numbers are not just agricultural trivia. They reveal concentration. They reveal dependency. When a single country grows nearly 3/4 of the world's garlic, the history of flavor becomes a history of logistics, labor, and power. This is the part that should make you angry. In 2014, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission reported that there had been little substantive reduction in the scale and scope of China's prison labor network, and that goods intended for export were still being produced on a potentially large scale. In 2017, reporting from the Financial Times on garlic supply chains described former prisoners in Xinjiang, one of the great centers of garlic production, saying that peeling so much garlic could dissolve fingernails and expose raw flesh. They knew where the margins were. They knew how the world wanted cheap peel clothes, ready to cook, odorless in plastic, frictionless in hand. And they chose output over people. Garlic had fed laborers in the age of pyramids. In the modern age, under certain conditions, labor once again vanished behind the bulb. If you're finding this interesting, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, and you will not want to miss what comes next. After that dark fact, the modern story opens back out, because garlic did not just become bigger. It became more deeply embedded in everyday life almost everywhere. China industrialized the crop at massive scale and became the center of global supply. India kept garlic rooted in one of the world's oldest culinary traditions while producing more than 3.2 million tons a year. Egypt turned nearly 500,000 tons into both domestic use and exports. South Korea, where garlic is central to daily cooking, still produces more than 318,000 tons despite far smaller land and population than the giants above it. Spain remains Europe's signature producer, and even after declines in recent years, it still anchors continental supply. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Once garlic became normal in stir-fries, pasta sauces, pickles, marinades, dumplings, curries, kimchi, sausages, stews, and street food across dozens of countries, it stopped being a regional taste and became one of the baseline flavors of globalization. Modern science has also given garlic a strange second career beyond cooking. Researchers studying garlic's organosulfur compounds have explored its use in food preservation, especially in meat systems where compounds such as diallyl sulfide and diallyl disulfide can reduce bacterial growth. Garlic extract have also been used in green synthesis for silver nanoparticles and in controlled-release antimicrobial materials aimed at bacteria, such as MRSA. That is a long way from an ancient worker chewing a raw clove before labor. It is the same plant, but now it appears in laboratories, packaging research, nanotechnology, and industrial antimicrobial design. This is a part of the story that most people never learn. A crop once valued because it was cheap enough for workers is now studied because its chemistry may solve expensive modern problems. The health story, of course, has never really gone away. Ancient texts prescribed garlic across Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, and India. Modern research continues to test the old claims one by one, with more caution and more precision. Some traditional hopes hold up better than others. Some prove difficult outside the lab, but the continuity is remarkable. A plant praised 5,000 years ago for strength, infection, and endurance is still being investigated today for antimicrobial potential and functional food use. Few ingredients keep that kind of medical reputation across 5 millennia. Fewer still remain cheap enough to sit on an ordinary cutting board. And then there's the simplest fact of all. Garlic conquered the world not because it was rare, but because it was repeatable. It could be divided, planted, stored, traded, cooked, dried, crushed, pickled, roasted, pounded into medicine, and folded into the diet of almost any class of society. It traveled with migrants because it tasted like home. It traveled with armies because it kept well. It traveled with merchants because it sold. It traveled with doctors because people believed in it. And when industrial agriculture arrived, it traveled in containers because billions of people already knew what to do with it. So when you look back across the full arc, the pattern is almost poetic. It was there in the crypts of ancient Egypt. It was there in the hands of Sumerian healers. It was there in Greek athletics and Roman campaigns. It was there in the medical schools of the Islamic world. It was there in plague years, in medieval kitchens, in colonial cargo, in immigrant neighborhoods, in factory farms, in refrigerated trade lanes, and in modern laboratories studying antimicrobial compounds that ancient people could smell but never name. It was there when empires rose. It was there when ships rewired the planet. It was there when science began to explain what folklore had long insisted upon. And it was there in that tomb at the beginning of this story, lying beside a dead king, carrying the same harsh scent that drifts out of a pan in an ordinary kitchen today. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories behind everyday things.